Tonight, an urgent call for transparency about intimate partner violence after a woman's killing at the hands of her husband.
If it just reaches one person, then maybe it just wasn't all in tragedy.
Why her daughter is speaking out, hoping to help others. Just days to go before America votes, Kamala Harris takes aim at more inflammatory comments from Donald Trump.
Whether the women like it or not, I'm going to protect them.
And what the election could mean for Canada. At issue, we'll break that down.
Baby, now we got bad blood.
Plus, Toronto readies for a swift invasion.
It's going to be crazy. I'm going to try to avoid Toronto at all costs that day.
From CBC News, this is The National with Erica Johnson.
Thanks for joining us. Adrian is away. We begin tonight in Nova Scotia, where haunting new details have surfaced about the days leading up to the killing of a woman by her husband. Like so many women before her, Brenda Tatloc-Burke was trying to leave a toxic marriage when things took a violent turn. Now, 2 weeks after her death, Brenda's daughter is sharing her story and urging the RCMP to acknowledge the tragedy for what it is: intimate partner violence committed by a former Mountie. Kayla Hounsell has her calls for change.
This is Brenda Tatloc-Burke. Her daughter says she was killed by her husband, Mike Burke, a retired RCMP officer who then killed himself.
He was very controlling.
Tatloc-Burke had been visiting her daughters in Alberta. They took her to the airport to return to Nova Scotia on October 16th. She was planning to leave her husband.
I asked her multiple times before she left, "Are you safe? Are you going to be okay when you leave?"
2 days later, she was dead. The RCMP say they were called to Enfield, Nova Scotia for a well-being check. Inside this house, they say they found a woman who had died by homicide and a man by self-inflicted injuries. They say they won't release any further information due to the Privacy Act and out of respect for the family.
Nobody's ever asked us what we wanted to keep private.
The RCMP has now confirmed this is a case of intimate partner violence, but only after CBC News conveyed the family's frustrations. They didn't originally label it as such. The Force declined an interview and still won't confirm the case involves a former Mountie, saying it can't disclose anyone's past employment unless it's to advance an investigation.
When you're protecting people who have that kind of authority or stature in society, you're making it really hard for people that are in that position to leave because they think that it's only happening to them.
They're that much more vulnerable in terms of their own safety, their partner's access to weapons.
This advocate says there's not a lot of research in Canada around the prevalence of police-perpetrated intimate partner violence.
There is some research, however, coming out of the States that indicates that intimate partners of law enforcement experience domestic violence at significantly higher rates than the general population.
I just hope it helps even just one person.
Tatloc-Burke's daughter says she wants her to be remembered not just for the terrible way she died, but as an outgoing person who loved to sing. An entertainer who loved to make people laugh. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
If you or someone you know is experiencing intimate partner violence and needs somewhere to go, there are resources that can help. Or in the case of an emergency, call 911. Now to Spain, where the scope of the devastation is becoming clearer tonight as rescue workers comb streets ravaged by deadly floods. At least 158 people have died. Yasmin Renea shows us scenes of despair as some cry out for missing loved ones.
A harrowing rescue as firefighters hoist up a baby from floodwaters, following Europe's deadliest floods in years. With roads turned into rivers, rescuers help people and pets escape homes, while others use dogs to search for the missing. A desperate ordeal for some, like this woman shouting out the name of a missing loved one. Local authorities have not disclosed how many people are still unaccounted for. They believe some victims are trapped inside vehicles yet to be reached. Meanwhile, people in the hardest hit areas salvage what they can from the ruined homes. Father and husband Amadeo Ibanez says he feels powerless. The river rose for half an hour, he says. We have lost almost everything, or everything. Residents on the outskirts of Valencia say their community is unrecognizable. Pharmacy student Natalia Perez says the view here was once great. This bridge was really nice, she says. It was an ancient bridge with ruins, and now there's nothing left. Nothing. Meteorologists say in parts of the country, a year's worth of rain fell in just hours.
This was a well-forecasted event by the Spanish Meteorological Services. What happened on a decision-making level is another story.
Regional officials are being criticized for waiting too long to warn people of the dangers.
People's lives could and should have been saved.
Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez visiting an emergency command center Thursday, urging people to stay home, warning the dangers are far from over. Yasmin Ranea, CBC News, Vancouver.
A powerful typhoon slammed into Taiwan today, killing at least 2 people. The storm hit with torrential rains and wind gusts topping 220 kilometers an hour. Low-lying areas were inundated with water. It's the biggest storm to hit the island in nearly 3 decades. In the U.S., with just 4 full days until the presidential election, every move and word on the campaign trail counts. Tonight, Donald Trump is facing backlash over new comments about women. Katie Simpson now with what was said and the reaction.
Kamala Harris in attack mode as she hit swing state Arizona, seizing on Donald Trump's latest inflammatory comments about women.
He does not believe women should have the agency and authority to make decisions about their own bodies.
Trump made the remark in question during his rally in Wisconsin.
My people told me about 4 weeks ago, I was saying, no, I want to protect the people. I want to protect the women of our country. I want to protect the women. Sir, please don't say that.
Recounting how his staff told him that kind of statement is inappropriate.
I'm going to do it whether the women like it or not. I'm going to protect them.
This won't likely help Trump with a demographic he needs badly, suburban women.
I think there are a lot of women who are still somewhat hesitant. Those women who are on the fence, to whom that will be extremely offensive, and it will sway the vote.
Vice President of the United
Trump's running mate making headlines too.
If you are a, middle class or upper middle class white parent, and the only thing that you care about is whether your child goes into Harvard or Yale.
J.D. Vance telling podcaster Joe Rogan some children identify as transgender in order to get an advantage with their college admissions.
The one way that those people can participate in the DEI bureaucracy in this country is to be trans. If you become trans, that is the way to reject your white privilege.
And Vance says he thinks divisions over trans rights could help Trump's election chances with some LGBTQ voters.
I wouldn't be surprised if me and Trump won just the normal gay guy vote, because, again, they just wanted to be left the hell alone.
Both Trump and Harris have packed schedules with plans to keep targeting swing states for the final stretch of this race. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
And of course, we will have special coverage on election night. Join Adrian and Ian next Tuesday as the votes are counted. Coverage starts at 8 p.m. Eastern, wherever you watch CBC News. In Philadelphia, Elon Musk skipped out on a court hearing challenging his $1 million a day giveaway to U.S. voters in swing states. The judge ruled to pause the lawsuit while a federal court considers whether to take it up, a move that allows Musk to continue the sweepstakes until Tuesday's election. The Alberta government is laying out its plans to make big changes to the health and education systems. As Aaron Collins explains, they include restricting access to gender-affirming treatments and changing how students are taught sex ed.
A busy day in Alberta's legislature.
Bill 26.
Bill 27. Bill 29.
Bills tabled that could mean big changes for Alberta's health and education systems. One facilitating the breakup of Alberta's province-wide health board, at the same time making controversial changes to gender-affirming care for youth, restricting access to surgery, hormone treatment, and puberty blockers for minors.
These policies are designed and intended to help preserve the choices children have before they make serious decisions about their bodies.
Well, the new rules drafted after consulting with some members of the trans community.
These all in the right spirit and the right direction to ensure that kids are being protected.
But that opinion far from universal.
We know that gender-affirming care is necessary. It is life-saving care.
Well, the new bills will also impact how gender and sexuality are taught in schools. Parents will now have to opt their kids into sex ed instead of opting out. An unnecessary change, say some who teach youth about sexuality.
There's lots and lots and lots of parents who are really, really happy that sexual health education takes place in schools, and they don't need an extra layer of approval.
The new laws would also force schools to inform parents when kids ask to change their pronouns and add limits on transgender athletes competing in sport. The suite of laws upsetting the opposition.
The most heinous, most rigorous anti-trans legislation, anti-sex ed legislation that we've seen anywhere in the country.
The flurry of legislation comes just days before the Premier faces a leadership review. Some political watchers say it's directed squarely at the right flank of the United Conservative Party.
Danielle Smith has to placate these folks that are well organized and very motivated to try to get their agenda front and center.
And Aaron, how concerned is Danielle Smith about the leadership vote?
Well, Erica, there is a real sense out there that the Premier is sweating this vote quite a bit. And you know, if history is any indicator, she's got some reason to be concerned. Alberta's Conservatives, well, they eat their own. I mean, Danielle Smith only has the job of Premier because her party kicked out her predecessor, Jason Kenney. So this weekend, what do we have? 6,000 United Conservative Party members congregating at the AGM. And the question for Danielle Smith, how many of them are showing up to support her and how many are showing up for her head?
Thanks for this, Aaron Collins in Calgary. One day after a CBC News investigation revealed concerns about potential price fixing in the Canadian rental market, the federal government says it's asking the Competition Bureau to investigate the use of the software YieldStar by some landlords to help set rent prices.
It's completely unacceptable what we've seen. I'm going to be writing to the Competition Commissioner today to launch an investigation.
More than 100 Canadian tenants have also asked for that investigation. YieldStar's parent company, RealPage, insists its software operates legally. Police in BC say they have shut down the biggest illicit drug lab in Canada's history.
These enforcement actions have undoubtedly saved thousands of lives in Canada and abroad.
RCMP say they seized nearly half a ton of illicit drugs and ingredients that would have yielded more than 95 million doses of potentially lethal fentanyl and nearly $500 million in criminal profit. One man is in custody, but more arrests are expected. More than 400 people have now come forward with allegations of sexual misconduct against former Harrods owner Mohamed Al-Fayed. As Chris Brown tells us, the scale of the claims has many questioning why more wasn't done to stop the billionaire before his death.
The scale of sexual abuse Harrods owner Mohamed Al-Fayed is accused of inflicting on his female staff over the decades is staggering. These women are among 400 alleged survivors who've come forward. Jen was just 16 when she says the owner of the iconic London department store molested her. Lindsay was 20.
35 years of, being silenced and not being verified, and also having to dig deep to keep it hidden.
I was deeply ashamed of what happened to me, and I still feel that shame today. And I think being able to speak publicly is part of that healing process.
Fayed, who became globally famous after his son Dodi was killed in the same car crash as Princess Diana, died last year at the age of 94.
He would take my head and he would push it into his genitals.
In a BBC documentary broadcast last month, many of the girls and women who worked for his companies over 3 decades alleged Fayed's staff knew what he was doing and helped him avoid prosecution.
Industrial scale abuse that could have only been perpetrated with a system that enabled the abuse to happen.
In London, lawyers for survivors said the first of what's expected to be a mountain of legal claims has now been filed against Harrods. Among the recent revelations is that Ronnie Gibbons, the captain of the Fulham women's soccer team, also owned by Al-Fayed, was brought by car to his department store when she was 20 years old and sexually assaulted.
By speaking out, we are making it harder for this kind of behaviour to be tolerated anywhere.
Harrods has started its own compensation process for victims, but lawyers say many women don't feel comfortable dealing directly with the store, as senior staffers from the Al-Fayed era still work there. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
After a CBC Marketplace investigation into Air Canada's accessibility practices, the airline promised to do better serving travellers with disabilities. Now, months later, Travis Danraj put this airline to the test to see if anything had changed.
Marketplace flew Air Canada from Toronto to Fredericton with Brock Richardson.
I have periventricular leukomalacia, which is basically a brain injury.
Richardson saw our investigation last year that highlighted a series of concerning stories about accessible air travel. Alessia Di Virgilio had a lift hit her on the head. Our hidden cameras also capturing this moment.
What do I do with it? To say the word terrifying just doesn't fully capture how you feel.
Air Canada pledged to improve staff training, boarding procedures, and make necessary equipment available. But Marketplace found some promises weren't being kept. In Fredericton, no lift is available to assist in moving Richardson, and despite Air Canada's new policy, he didn't board the plane first.
There is some vulnerability that goes on when you're being transferred, and I didn't sign up for that to be amongst the public.
We were requested by authorities to board a number of other customers before.
Then there's this moment.
I'm not comfortable with that at all.
A staffer tells him his support person needs to get off the plane during a transfer.
If they're not assisting or anything like this, then we have to ask them to deboard the aircraft.
After some back and forth, she's allowed to stay.
We'll need to clarify the policy. I don't have that information right now.
We also documented an Air Canada manager appearing to record a seat transfer without Richardson's consent.
It's not Air Canada policy to do that. What we do is we do take photos occasionally of mobility aids that are being stowed to ensure that there's no damage once that's being stowed in the cargo hold.
Air Canada now says they only took pictures of Richardson's empty wheelchair and tell him they regret his overall experience. They've also reached out to him for feedback and to offer a $1,000 coupon as a goodwill gesture. They've also sent a lift to the Fredericton International Airport. Travis Danraj, CBC News, Toronto.
You can watch Travis's full investigation tomorrow on Marketplace. That's at 8 p.m. on CBC Television, 8:30 in Newfoundland, or stream it on CBC Gem. Donald Trump's trying to take advantage of Kamala Harris's flip-flop on fracking.
I will end Kamala's war, and we will frack, frack, frack.
Susan Ormiston takes us to Texas for a closer look at the personal and political stakes. Plus, Taylor Swift's coming to Toronto, but is the city ready?
This is a lot of visitors.
And celebrating Halloween across the globe. The many moments that make our moment. We're back in 2. It's not just Halloween tonight, but also Diwali, the Hindu festival of lights. These are some of the vibrant celebrations across India. Diwali officially ends Friday morning. In American states that produce oil and gas, fracking is an issue that could sway voters this Tuesday. CBC's international climate correspondent Susan Ormiston visited a city in Texas to find out how it's having an impact on people and politics.
Right behind me is a drill site where Total Energies, a French corporation, is extracting natural gas using the process of hydraulic fracturing. All of this land.
Ranjana Pandari is fracking's foe, protesting the expansion of gas wells about 100 meters from people's homes in Arlington, Texas.
People have reported severe noise, very bright lights 24/7, homes shaking, walls rattling.
Last election, Joe Biden won this county by a hair. But Kamala Harris has a struggle. 5 years ago, she campaigned to ban fracking.
There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking.
Then once vice president, she changed her position.
I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as vice president of the United States.
But still, Trump calls her out, as recently as this week in Pennsylvania.
I will end Kamala's war on Pennsylvania energy, and we will frack, frack, frack.
Here in Texas, fracking has spiked levels of shale gas and oil production. It's also rattling nerves, and not only over politics. A series of small earthquakes snaked through this community last July, one at 5.1 magnitude.
We were sitting on the couch and my daughter ran out. Everything started shaking. You could just feel on the walls and stuff. And we're like, oh, I'm like, it's another earthquake, whatever.
Seismologists confirmed tremors are related to the water injection process with fracking, and a few well operators were told to pull back or shut.
What do you think caused that? Oh, I have no clue. They say the oil field around here has caused it, but I don't know.
But West Texas is not about to stifle production, and the state will almost certainly go with Trump.
He's been very honest and very clear about what he would do. He had a meeting with oil execs at Mar-a-Lago where he told them that if you give me $1 billion, I'm going to, pretty much make sure you get your wish list.
So she's bracing for a next fight after the election. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Arlington, Texas.
Taylor Swift's due in Toronto in 14 days, and about 500,000 people are tagging along.
It's going to be crazy. I'm going to try to avoid Toronto at all costs that day.
6 concerts, 2 weeks of chaos. What's being done to make sure the city's ready? After the break, Rosie is here with At Issue.
Hi, Erica. Tonight we're going to talk about the Liberal Party's ongoing challenges and the opposition parties making moves to bring the government down.
We were to start discussing with opposition parties in order to have this government fall.
Have the Liberals addressed all those issues around their caucus unrest? How are the opposition preparing to force an election? Chantal, Althea, and Andrew join me to talk about that and a lot more.
Sarah McLachlan is apologizing to Canadian fans tonight for cancelling 13 concert dates in 7 provinces due to illness. The first was slated for Friday in Orillia, Ontario. She recently canceled some U.S. concerts on the same tour, citing acute laryngitis. McLachlan said new dates will be announced and tickets will be honored. The most talked about concert series in the world is taking over Toronto's downtown next month. The city now says it has a plan for handling a massive influx of fans. Here's Thomas Dagla.
Arriving on trains and planes, up to 500,000 visitors are set to invade Toronto for Canada's biggest concert event in years.
Oh my gosh, it's going to be crazy. I'm going to try to avoid Toronto at all costs that day.
'Cause baby, now we got bad blood.
Taylor Swift's Eras Tour, a global spectacle turning the city upside down for 6 shows in November.
One, this is a lot of visitors at 500,000. 2, they're each projected to spend a lot of money.
City officials now laying out how they're preparing for all those incoming Swifties. Transit staff will run extra subway trains and streetcars, while Toronto's also postponing some downtown road work to help ease that notorious traffic.
City Council even voted to temporarily rename this route downtown that many Swifties will take to the concert venue. So the stadium, best known as the home of the Blue Jays, will see its address changed for the month of November to 1 Taylor Swift Way.
Can you think of anyone else in the world the city would do so much for other than Taylor Swift?
First thing I would say is that we don't book major acts in this city, but we do want to be a city that attracts them.
With Swift forced to cancel shows in Vienna this summer over an ISIS-linked plot to kill thousands, Toronto police say they're watching for trouble.
We are continuously monitoring any potential threats. There are no threats at this time.
The highest grossing music tour of all time, Swift's concerts inject big money everywhere they go, with Toronto expecting a boost of nearly $300 million.
It's good for the city. It brings in tourists, right? And so that's revenue.
A historic visit from the world's biggest star. Call it Toronto, Taylor's version. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, Toronto.
Now let's break down the week in politics. Rosie is here with At Issue.
At issue tonight, state of play. The Liberals are now being threatened by the Bloc to bring them down and force an election.
Not only are we ready, but we might be expecting that with enthusiasm.
A request for a secret ballot vote in caucus on the Prime Minister's leadership seems to have gone nowhere fast.
No, there's no process in our Constitution to give caucus that power.
The party did respond to some caucus concerns by launching its first digital ad.
The Liberal team is fighting for you.
So how have the Liberals managed another challenging week filled with deadlines, some caucus unrest, and a Prime Minister on the offensive? I'm Rosemary Barton, here to walk us through a busy week so far. Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, and Althea Raj. Good to see you all, as usual. Chantal, where do you think we're at now, sort of a week after that caucus meeting last week, and some changes and sort of new pressures on the Liberals from the Bloc Québécois?
We're almost back to where we were when the House came back in September. The Prime Minister is on shaky ground, but he's determined to stay, and at this point, I don't see a process that will take him out of that chair. The NDP looks like it's going to be supporting the government pretty much into the new year, and the Bloc Québécois has come and gone as a party that held the balance of power. But bottom line, I think the odds of an election this year in 2024 have gone down this week, despite the Bloc's tough words about this is it, we're going to pull the plug. Well, they never have sole control of that plug, and I think rather wisely, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh kind of ended the suspense early on this one.
There are, I think by our last count in this Bureau, about 13 Liberal MPs who have asked for this secret ballot to happen in caucus, Andrew. But there's no requirement or mechanism to have it. Do you think that the Prime Minister, in both how he's handled this and in the way he responded in the House yesterday to Pierre Poilievre and this ad, have sort of calmed the waters and addressed some of the concerns that caucus has?
Maybe for some caucus members. I mean, you can be bought pretty cheaply if all you have to do is unveil a couple of ads. But it may signal that they're in a little bit more fighting trim than they were. I don't think the odds necessarily have changed that much, so much as just it's more apparent now how little things had changed. The NDP was never going to vote for, turkeys aren't going to vote for the early Christmas. The NDP is not going to bring on an election that they're not ready for anytime soon. And neither are the Liberal MPs, in the absence of any clear preferred alternative, going to invite the kind of instability that they would be facing. I don't say that one side of that argument is right or wrong, but I think it's completely governed by their perceptions of self-interest, as indeed the NDP's choices are. So, yeah, we've defaulted to the least interesting result. That's bad for the news business, but it's probably reality of where people's perceptions and realities are.
Althea?
A few things. I think it's not necessarily over in terms, the ask was not made at caucus, because my understanding is Andrew Bevan, the new campaign director, basically took up the whole time talking about the new strategy. So that ask probably will come. The issue is, for a lot of those MPs, what they were asking the Prime Minister to do, they genuinely thought was get him to reflect about the future of the political party, and not just his future, but his future tied to the political party itself. And they genuinely believed that they thought that they could get to him and that he would hear that message. And I think that many of them have realized that he was not, he's heard that message before and he's discounted it. And for him, it's about his future, and he wants to lead that battle. And so you're either with him or you're not with him. And what does not being with him look like? Are they ready to leave caucus? Some might be, but they would still vote with the government. And most of them still want to run under the Liberal Party banner. So why would they exit his caucus if they still want to be Liberals? So that conversation aside, with regards to the Bloc Québécois, I think they actually hoped that the Liberals would negotiate with them because they seemed kind of sad today that the Liberals would be willing to have an election rather than give them what they wanted. In that caucus meeting, the Prime Minister talked about no leaks to the media, but he also talked about how it was important not just have the NDP to rely on. So I think there will be some overtures to the Bloc. For the NDP, they need those pharmacare deals done. And there aren't any at the moment. And so until we have money going out the door and people actually getting free contraception, aside from British Columbia where that's provincial, and free diabetes medication, part of their ask at the next election isn't complete yet. So until that happens, I think the government can continue to govern.
I think there's maybe 3 other things that would have to change before anything would change. One is we have to wait and see what happens in the U.S. election. That is a potential wild card that could affect politics here in a profound way, depending on what happens. We'll discuss that. Secondly, there's a couple of by-elections in the spring, or supposed to be in the spring. That may give us further information, may affect things. It may be too late by then. And thirdly, the Liberals, if you look at the average of the polls now, are, I think, maybe 2 points ahead of the NDP. If you started seeing polls showing the NDP actually ahead of Liberals, I'm not saying this is going to happen, that might be the sort of thing that would set the cat amongst the pigeons, as it were.
Right. Chantal.
Yes, except that the NDP is almost level with the Liberals because the Liberals are way down, not because the NDP is catching up to them.
That's right. Yeah.
If you look at those numbers, if you look at what happened in BC, which I believe really put a damper on any election fever within that caucus, the BC election basically sent a signal, if the NDP needed it, that they are at risk of losing members in BC in the next election to the Conservatives. So as for the pharmacare deals, I'm guessing the problem is who's going to be signing those deals. It's not going to be Quebec, it's not going to be Ontario, probably not BC because that's already in the works. So where do you go to sign those deals in a way that is significant electorally and that is so advanced that the next government, whoever leads it, will not want to just back out of it? Dental care, I think, is fairly safe. The sign-up was really significant, but I don't really see. As for by-elections in the spring, by the spring it's going to be much too late to change Liberal leaders in any scenario.
Bet you could knock on Manitoba's door for one of those pharmacare deals, even though I think they also offer free contraception, but there's ways around that. I mean, I think that dental care piece is an important one, Althea. It's like 1 million people now have signed up. It does also then sort of hurt, or I wonder if it hurts the Liberals' argument in this digital ad that Pierre Poilievre is only going to cut things. He hasn't said what he's going to do, but if there's 1 million people using a program, it's a lot harder to cut.
Well, it's one of the reasons why the Conservatives would rather have an election sooner rather than later, because they don't want programs to be further entrenched. Also, the polls are obviously in their favor at the moment. The pharmacare deal, there's a memorandum of understanding with British Columbia, so there's something to build on now that the NDP has formed the government. Unfortunately for the NDP, they weren't able to ride like a Saskatchewan wave, like Thomas Mulcair tried to ride the Rachel Notley wave back in 2015 and kind of like get people looking at the NDP as the progressive alternative. But I do agree with Andrew, if you have significant, week after week of the NDP leading the Liberals, then not just for Mr. Trudeau to look at his own future, but for Jagmeet Singh to think, okay, well, now people are starting to look at me as being prime ministerial material. Maybe, who cares about the policy? Maybe now is the time. I will just add a little asterisk. There are 3 opposition days that, should the filibuster ends, there's 2 potential filibuster, the current one and then another privilege motion that would have to be passed just before Christmas. So 3 opportunities for the House to say they have no confidence in the government. That's pretty risky, and that's why there's some chatter around here that after a cabinet shuffle after the U.S. election, there may be some prorogation talk, but I have not heard anybody in the government actually suggest that.
I haven't either. Yes, Andrew.
Can I just quickly add, I don't think people need to see Jagmeet Singh as prime ministerial material. They just need to see him as their preferred anti-Poilievre.
Yes.
And I agree with Chantal, there's certainly been no great surge for the NDP, but that left of center vote is very volatile. It can move back and forth between the parties. If they start to see him as the better Poilievre fighter, then you could get the water flowing to the other end of the bathtub in a hurry. If people said, okay, the Liberals can't do it anymore, we need to unite behind the NDP.
Last word, Chantal.
Yes, except that the people who want change did not look to the NDP. They're all standing in the Pierre Poilievre's column. And in Quebec, they're all rushing to the Bloc Québécois. One poll had them over 40%. So it's getting late in the game to suddenly discover that the NDP is the refugee value on this market.
Okay, I got to leave it there. As Andrew suggested, because he's really good at broadcasting, when we return, we'll look ahead to the U.S. election.
I am putting it all on the field, and it's going to be a very tight race.
Just days to go. What's at stake for Canada with either presidential candidate? What could it mean for our relationship with our closest ally? That's next. At issue, the U.S. election with days to go until America chooses its next president. It is a close race, and each candidate is presenting a different vision for the country.
Under the Trump administration, we're going to take back what is rightfully ours. We're going to bring it back with smart tariffs.
They want a president of the United States who, as I say, will walk into the Oval Office with a to-do list and not an enemies list.
So what would either candidate mean for Canada? Let's bring everybody back to break down the consequences. Chantal, Andrew, and Althea. Andrew, why don't you start us off here? Obviously, there's obvious things that we are worried about: trade, immigration, that kind of stuff. But what do you think Canada should be focused on the most here as we head into the unknown of Tuesday?
The unknown. I think what's fundamentally at stake here, I don't want to overstate this, is the stability of America as a democracy. That's at issue regardless of who wins.
Yes.
If Kamala Harris wins, you are going to see a concerted effort by the Trump campaign, and there's really no doubt about this, to try to call into question the legitimacy of the election, no matter what the results are, I mean, within reason. I think maybe even with outside reason. They have plots afoot, plans afoot, to try to, monkey around with the Electoral College vote, to throw it into the House of Representatives. We have to understand that he and his followers are not bound by the norms and conventions of ordinary politics, and they will step outside it in any way they see fit. Trump is desperate. He needs to stay out of jail. So that's if Harris wins. And so you're looking at weeks of potentially instability and maneuvering and paralysis coming out of that. Hopefully that's manageable. If Trump wins, you're going to see a much more concerted assault on the rule of law and democratic norms in the United States that will last for years. I don't think he'll succeed in any ambition to try to transform it into a dictatorship, but I do think you're looking at a prolonged period of chaos and upheaval as people try to push back on some of his wilder schemes. For example, the idea of deporting 12 million immigrants, legal or illegal, is on its own a policy that has potential for enormous instability and upheaval.
When I interviewed Frank McKenna, Canada's former ambassador to the United States, he thought it would be Trump unleashed. That's sort of how he characterized what another Trump mandate would be. Chantal?
Yes, to echo what Andrew said, the choice the Americans make on Tuesday at best mean it won't be business as usual for a number of months. That's the Harris scenario. Or it will not be business as usual for years. That's the Trump scenario. Now, if you are looking to be the Prime Minister of Canada, if you're named Trudeau or Poilievre, over the next 4 years, and you have policies that you want to put in place, you want the not business as usual just for a few months. You do not want the Trump result. Because all of the people that were considered the adults that would normalize the first Trump presidency are basically telling Americans not to vote for him. That's not normal. For those who don't cover politics, that is not how it works. People who work for presidents, prime ministers, ministers stay loyal. They do not go out and say, never vote for this guy that I've seen up close. That's what's happening next door. So I don't think Pierre Poilievre or Justin Trudeau would be terribly well equipped to deal with this, because it would mean trying to live next to a totally unpredictable administration, and that would suck the oxygen out of the public policy room in favor of trying to manage the day-to-day of this.
Yeah, I mean, all the things that Trump is talking about, certainly tariffs, mass deportation, would have a potentially disastrous impact on the economy in the United States, which would inevitably impact us. It would be, I mean, I think Althea just constantly reacting and trying to respond to that stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to separate them. So I agree with Andrew, and I think he said it best when he said norms and conventions and the rule of law, like that's basically what's on the ballot with Donald Trump. Yes, it would be living next to instability all the time. We would also be far less well-equipped than we were in 2016 because the people around him have changed, and there are less, the people around him are more extreme, we don't have those links to be able to have a kind of a more normal diplomatic relationship than we would, or than the government had, than Canada had back in 2016. But I think it's not, we shouldn't downplay what that relationship would mean for Canada. Economic insecurity, we're so economically tied to the United States. What do we renegotiate? NAFTA 3.0? What if Donald Trump decides he doesn't want to renegotiate and actually tells Canada that he's pulling out of the deal? There's a lot of insecurity on that front. But that being set aside, it's not going to be smooth sailing with Kamala Harris either. We're entering an era of increased protectionism in the United States, and a lot of the trade irritants could be big challenges ahead, even if she wins. So regardless, I don't think it will be a harder relationship to navigate no matter who is in the White House. Just one is
I mean,
monumentally more difficult.
Orders of magnitude different. I mean, since 1867, the basic foundation of our reality as a country is we could always assume that the country to our south, the Colossus to our south, was a stable, united, democratic country. So we didn't have to worry about it too much. We'd have little disputes here and there about softwood lumber or tariffs, but we didn't have to fundamentally worry about, you know, how stable it's going to be. That is no longer an assumption we can make. There's the potential for things to get very unstable. I mean, we're dealing with sort of chaos theory here, where things could really spiral out of control if somebody decides to get violent, for example.
30 seconds, Chantal.
So suppose that it's the other result and it's a decisive Harris victory. There will be challenges, but one of the issues that I'm interested in really is the impact of a Democrat in the White House on the climate policy of a conservative government in Canada, because there will be more pressure. And it won't be only on the environmental side, it will be also on the business case side. Also, by the way, there is a deadline in 2026 for people, the countries in NAFTA, to signal whether they want to renegotiate, bail out, leave. That will be happening, and it's in 2026.
Okay, so we'll have lots to talk about next week and the weeks ahead. Thank you all for your smart thoughts there. Appreciate it. Now I'll send things back to Erica in Vancouver.
Thanks, Rosie. Up next, celebrating Halloween around the globe. The fun and frightening festivities in our moment. You're looking at a family in Thailand all dressed up for the spookiest night of the year. Around the world, people are wearing their best costumes, getting ready to scare and be scared. From Hong Kong to London, tonight, those Halloween festivities make our moment. scary stuff. I love the enthusiasm. And here is a fun Halloween fact for you. According to a survey by one poll, 86% of parents steal their kids' Halloween candy. I find that number surprising. Only 86%? That's it for this evening. Thank you for being with us. You can watch the show anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app and subscribe to the National's YouTube channel. I'm Erica Johnson. Take care.